and we're ready to go.
Okay. Now, can everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Super. Okay, so just I suppose again to say that I am the vice chair of Limerick Cycling Campaign. I joined the campaign back in 2019. So I'm there ever since. I'm also co-founder of Limerick Cycle Bus, so a project that we set up back in 2019 as well. Actually, it was kind of setting up that led me to join the cycling campaign. Um, so for anybody not familiar with cycle buses, very quickly, basically, they're an alternative mode of transport or um, that's based on active travel for children to get to school. So we set one up. We were the first one in the country, starting in Galway in September 2019, and we set up the second one then in Limerick in January 2020. So it's basically it's a crew of parents and children that cycle to school every morning, and we call it the Limerick cycle bus. So you might have some mornings you might have 7 or 8 people on it, and other mornings you might have 30 people on it. So it's an alternative mode of transport for kids getting to school. And then I suppose a little bit of what I'm going to talk about today is this new project we started this year. So it ran for the full course of the year, which was an e-cargo bike share project. So I was project lead on that. So when we say we're a cycling campaign, so what are we about? And I suppose the way we look at it is it's not all about cycling. It is, of course, about cycling, but it's when you break it down, what are we really talking about? We're talking a huge amount about active commuting. We're talking a huge amount about health, about business, about community. Um, it's we talk about reducing noise pollution, social inclusion, foreign direct investment, fighting social isolation. It's about growth, it's about moving people around, and it's about sustainability. So, yes, our conversations on the face of it could look like they're all about cycling, but very often, we spend a huge amount time talking about, especially in the submissions we make, which is a huge part of our work, I suppose. We talk about health. And recently, the last number of submissions I suppose we've put in this year and last year have been about business and trying to add that component to it to demonstrate that, look, this isn't all about, I suppose, a small group of people that want to cycle. This is about much more than that. And so we've been successful in trying to get the voice of the business community heard in the discussions and the consultations and the engagement about certain active travel routes and proposed routes. And a huge part of our work, actually, more and more, is about social inclusion. And again, back to the kind of the day-to-day work of the campaign, making those submissions. Very often we're highlighting that when these routes are being proposed and designed, that they need to be connecting to pockets of the city that I suppose heretofore are kind of considered marginalised, would be considered excluded. And Limerick has a particular issue in that domain, in that we have certain parts of the city that are excluded and are considered regeneration areas. And so we have made it a real focus of our work that any of the submissions we make um, would be about connecting cycle routes insofar as is possible to some of these areas, um, areas that are considered, I suppose, cut off from the main city centre activity, business activity, education activity, and have paid a high price for that. So, like I said, a lot of the conversations we have are about these types of things under the umbrella of talking about cycling. So this is a very kind of broad picture of Limerick. It's a small city. It's a very flat city. That's the topography of it. It's very easy to get around from the city centre to any of the outer parts of the suburbs. It's about 6 kilometres. So, from I suppose from in terms of active travel, it's a very easy city to get around if there were connected cycle routes for people. So I suppose a lot of the conversations we're having and the promotional work we do is around trying to, I suppose, demonstrate to people that for your 1 kilometre, your 2 kilometre, even your 5 kilometre trips, whether it's the school drops, whether it's just the work commute, whatever it is, that it is actually very, very doable um, by bike. And so that's, I suppose, a key focus of where we're coming from. We're also when we're having conversations about the potential that exists for Limerick, we like to use, I suppose, cities that are very similar to Limerick. And because sometimes I think the conversation can get hijacked by this idea that, we'll never be an Amsterdam or a Copenhagen or any of these traditional cities that people kind of think about when they think of, high levels of cycling. So Odense is a very similar city to Limerick in that, in terms of its size, but it's considered one of, well, at least when this article was written, one of the most livable places to live. And I suppose, you know, we kind of talk about Odense because of its similarity in terms of its population and things like that, and its focus in moving from, I suppose, a city concentrated on industrial industry to this more kind of um, tech kind of focus. So, um, in terms of the population, it's actually got a smaller population than Limerick, but it is, like I said, moving to tech, and in doing so, recognizing that to attract those kind of industries into the city centre, that the workforce wants a livable city. So, I suppose that's our motivation for comparing, I suppose, what is possible in Limerick is that Odense has done this work and is now considered one of the most livable cities as a result of it. Um, and by trying to explain to people that there's more to it than just there's more to a city than a commercial centre or a business centre. That for for many of these cities that are moving in this direction, the workforce wants to live in a livable city, a city where their children can walk to school, a city where they can walk to the shops, where they can, walk to theatre and nighttime activities and things like that, and the benefits from living in cities like that. So, these are some pictures from Odense, which kind of demonstrate, you have people cycling in twos and threes. You have people sharing the streets with pedestrians. You have very nice green city centres, and it just seems to be, a very attractive place to live. And so we kind of, this was a lot of the time when we're trying to demonstrate what's achievable for Limerick, we do make references to cities like this. And then just in terms of the hard, cold facts, between the difference between Odense and Limerick, in terms of the city central trips made by bike, you're looking at 50%. It's as low as 3% in Limerick. Children riding to school, it's as high as over 80% in Odense when we were looking at these figures, and it's unfortunately at 3% in Limerick. Kilometers of bike lanes in Odense, you're looking at something like 550. It could probably be more by now. It's very, very minimal in Limerick. And again, the thing that both cities have in common is this focus on high tech, um, becoming a high tech hub for education and industry. But unfortunately, this is Limerick today. Maybe this will play. Hopefully, it's playing for you. It's pretty typical of cities and towns throughout the country. Um, this is William Street, for anybody who doesn't know Limerick, this is one of the main streets through the city. And it's literally like this all day, Monday to Sunday. It's 2 lanes of traffic, and it's actually one of the busiest streets in Limerick because it's the hub for a lot of the buses out to the university and things like that. But unfortunately, it also looks like this. So these are all vacant, derelict, former shops and commercial premises, largely on William Street. So again, this could be mirrored in lots of other towns and cities across the country, and lots of other streets in Limerick actually too. This just happens to be a snapshot of some of the vacant properties um, in Limerick, and I think this as much as I. These images go in tandem with one another. When we see our cities and our towns clogged up, the way William Street is, very often you see this alongside it. So our ask is a connected, coherent, safe utility cycling network strategy with a cost and phased delivery plan. And to be fair, we have somewhat on the face of it started that now in that we have the Limerick and Shannon Metropolitan Area Transport Strategy, so LSMATS for short, which was delivered last year. But again, a very protracted, prolonged uh, I suppose 4 years to deliver that strategy. In that, the final one was the second version. The first one we got was incomplete. It didn't talk about schools. It didn't talk about active travel in any kind of coherent or meaningful way. It really just focused very much on cars and moving cars and through the city. So we advocated, and a huge piece of work was done, I suppose, over a 2.5, 3 year period um, of advocacy and activism around that. We set up a transport strategy, or a transport group in the city that consisted of business leaders and the Chamber of Commerce, and some political reps. And we asked them to take to go back and look at it again and redesign it, and which they had to do, thankfully. And so the second strategy was delivered. I don't know, was it delivered late last year, early this year, but much improved, and takes into consideration the regeneration areas that I was talking about earlier, which were completely absent from the first draft. Um, it takes into consideration the schools, and most importantly, I suppose, deliverables, outcomes, metrics, things that were all missing in the first one. The evidence around how we're going to look at how these things are either being delivered or not. And we felt that was a key component of it. So our other ask then is that an interconnected, human-centered, multimodal transport system that supports community, enterprise, and sustainable living. So ultimately, that is the larger, I suppose, target, um, and that we would continue to be ambitious in that regard. So just very quickly then, these are some of our cycle bus members. We have, as you can see there in the bottom slide on the right, some very, very young people on our cycle bus. They start in primary school, so they go from 4 or 5 right up to 12, 13 in secondary, or in sixth class. And this is Eugene and Aidan. So Aidan is, or Eugene is Aidan's granddad, and he takes him on the cycle bus every day. And I suppose what we're trying to demonstrate with these pictures is that our focus is on, universal access from 8 to 80, as it were, or in our case, from 4 to whatever it is. You don't want to put an age in it, but we really want to focus on people of all ages being able to safely hop on their bike or indeed walk in the city, and for the city to be a safe place for people to move about in. So there's some of our members. The e-cargo bike was a project that, as I said, we ran this year. Um, it began in the pub, where lots of great ideas come from, is discussions in the pub. And so the cycling campaign meets monthly. We have a floating membership of 60 people, and we've regularly collaborated with the members of the Limerick Cycle Bus, the Limerick Pedestrian Network, and we've ran events over the last few years, including a cyclovia. We do a critical mass once a month. We did a We Need Space campaign during COVID. And so we had this connection with these groups where we would regularly collaborate together. So through that, we had done a project with the Plus City Exchange, which is run by, I'll just move on to the next slide actually to see what it is. Plus City Exchange, our Positive City Exchange, came about through funding from Horizon 2020, and basically through the council, Limerick City and County Council. So there was an open call put out, and under the heading of social innovation and energy collaboration. So basically, members of the public were invited to present ideas and test out hypotheses, prototypes, ideas that they had, and there was funding available of €5,000. So Limerick Cycling Campaign, after discussing it with the cycle bus and the previous people I was talking about, we decided to put in a project so that we would buy an e-cargo bike and we would trial it to members of the public. So that's essentially what we've done. We received the funding, and we set up a steering group, and we bought the bike, and we basically have had a continuous waiting list since we started. We've had it was basically the aim of the project was toward families, households that were thinking of moving from 2 cars to one, or 1 car to none, or people that didn't have any car and wanted to were thinking about active travel or cargo bikes, but didn't want to invest or didn't want to proceed any further without having some experience of what it was like. So anybody with an interest would take the bike or did take the bike for 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks, and trialed it for the school run, trialed it for the work commute, for the grocery shopping. In some cases, a couple of businesses took it for their uses and their purposes, and they got to feel what it was like to have the bike. So very quickly, one bike became 5 bikes. So the project allowed us to purchase one bike, and then when we started to promote it, for example, Ruher in Dublin, a social enterprise in a bike shop, asked us if we wanted a long tail bike, which was a different type of cargo bike again. And then, so we had 2 bikes. And then there was a similar project happening in Limerick, in the University of Limerick. It was a research project, and it was aimed only at staff in the campus. And so they had some leftover bikes. They saw what we were doing, and they gave us 3 bikes. So we had people that were interested in trying all kinds of bikes. So um, for 6 of the 12 months, we've had 5 bikes, which has been great. So there's kind of just some clips of the media interest in it. We've had Rachel in right down there at the bottom. She usually takes the bus, so she was kind of trying to time would the bus or would the cargo bike get her to her destination quicker. And I think there was 5 minutes of a difference or something, like, no, 2 minutes of a difference actually between herself and the bus, and she was traveling from Limerick to Shannon. So it was, those kind of things were very novel. People were interested in them. Um, and that man down there in the middle, Limerick's Try Cargo Bike, he was one of the first people to trial it, and spoke very well actually about his disability and the fact that um, his cycling days, as he felt, were over because of this disability that he had. But in fact, the e-cargo bike opened it up to him again, and he has been a huge advocate of the program, actually enjoying the steering group very very quickly afterwards. And then we had company like Analog Devices, which is a huge company in Limerick, was very supportive as well. And so there are a few more pictures of everybody. We had lots of families, pets, people using it for sports, different times. And, a good number went on and bought a cargo bike afterwards. Not always the front box, some got the long tail bikes, but everybody was, that took part really, I suppose, spoke very highly of the experience. And we had, like I said, I think 4 or 5 families that went ahead so far and have bought a bike. So the data, very quickly, we've had to date, now this isn't updated, but the last time I went back to look at it, we've had 34 trials, we've had over 30 children and 25 households avail of the bikes. As I said, 3-week trial period, 2 businesses. We had one community group, South Hill Active Citizens, which were older, a group of older citizens that wanted to trial it and see how it went. And then we had 9 unsuccessful queries, simply because scheduling conflicts and things like that, it wouldn't work out. And there's some of the bikes and where we got them from. The feedback, I don't know if we have time to go through that, but basically it was very very positive, game changer. Most people said it took 3 weeks to kind of fully get into it. That the first week to grips with the bike, the second week you're trying to check out how far the distance, the trips, and by week 3 you don't want to give it back. Basically by week 3 they wanted to hold on to it. um and there's just, I suppose, a lot of people spoke about the fact that their kids could use it to get to school, and what a change that made to their morning commute. So that was a significant thing. um What's next? The scheme is meant to be over. It's not over. I still have about 4 families on the list that are looking for it. And you get that, like, even though we have put it out that the scheme is over, you still have people emailing us with interest. So we still have most of the bikes, so we're still scheduling people in. Um, it's been great, that project in UL that I spoke about, inclusive sustainable cycling. So they're moving on to the second stage of their research now, which is going to look at equity in e-bike use. And so they've asked us to partner on that, which is really exciting, I suppose, because, like I said at the very outset, social inclusion and working with groups, I suppose, that routinely or ordinarily aren't part of this conversation is a real focus of ours. The Climate Change Advisory Commission have contacted us around the project, so we've spoken to them. We're very keen to support other bodies, and we've done a little bit of this, other communities that want to do something similar. So we're very available to support people to do that. We want to promote the utility of bike share demonstrations as much as possible, because we think the trialing experience is really, really crucial, because it's an investment, and a lot of these bikes, cost a significant chunk of money. And then we want to maintain Limerick's spot on the ECF Cargo Bike Friendly Cities dashboard, or like we say here, make it a reality. And then finally, the main takeaways are that people love looking at and touching cargo bikes. There just seem to be, some people have said, feel good machines. Parking is problematic. Like I said, these bikes are an investment. We don't have good parking in Limerick City anyway, certainly. Um, Infrastructure goes without saying, without connected cycleways, that can be prohibitive. E-cargo bike functionality and utility is greater than just families with young children, which I suppose can often be the focus. That we need to start, I suppose, pushing and promoting the idea that they are really, really good for small businesses, for community groups, for moving small cargo. So that has been a focus toward the end of our trial. And then again, back to the whole idea of trialing before buying is crucial. Participants took, and I've said this already, they took the full 3 weeks to really get used to it. So that's it. That's I finished on the e-cargo bike. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Anne. That was really great. And welcome to people who joined us during the presentation. So is there anybody who would like to ask Anne any questions about, the scheme or the campaign to get to this point or anything like that? Sorry?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, and I may have missed you saying this, Anne. Thank you so much for that. But you started out with one cargo bike, but did you say the scheme itself had 5 bikes by the end, or was it just that it resulted in 5 purchases rather of bikes? And the other question was, why is a project ending?
Because I've no more time,
Okay.
basically. Well, and I kind of ran through it, I know. So we started with one bike, and then when we started promoting it, we had done a project previously with Ruher in Dublin and Phibsborough, Ruher the bike shop. And they contacted us and they said, look, do you have people that might want to trial another kind of cargo bike, which is because the first bike we had is the Baboo, the main one with the big
Yeah.
box up front. And so it was great to have an alternative e-cargo bike. So they kindly gave us that bike, and we still have it for the duration of the trial. And then, like I said, there was the project in UL. They had bikes left over, and they said, look, do you want to have some more?
Okay.
So we ended up with 5.
Amazing.
Yeah. And I suppose it's ending and it's not. It's ending because the timeline of the funding, the timeline of the project, was to September. And I suppose we still have the bike. The bike is part of Limerick cycling campaign now. And so I suppose what we've decided is, if anybody contacts us and wants to trial it, we're going to continue to do that. I suppose the ending bit is about, I suppose, returning the other 4 bikes to where they belong, because they're not our bikes. But certainly, we're going to keep the bike, use it for promotional activities, and for anybody who wants to try it.
Okay. Can I ask a couple of other questions, Aaron, if you don't mind? Did you, first of all, have any insurance issues to deal with as a group? And secondly, do you think this is a kind of model activity that would be easily replicable, or was it actually very time consuming for you as a group? I mean, I noticed that you've 60 or so members in Limerick Cycling Campaign. Many of the other cycling campaign groups or the One Future groups might not have as many people. Do you think you need to be a really big, well-functioning group to do a project like that?
In terms of the insurance, so we kind of focused on that at the start, and then realized it wasn't going to work. So we couldn't get anybody to insure us, because it was a bike share. And so we decided, we're just going to run this on the basis of trust. And we set out a kind of a terms of use, and we asked everybody to look at that and, I suppose, commit to that. We also had a bike manual. So basically, anybody who showed an interest and signed up, they got those 2 documents. And it really worked out. We've never had any issue with the bike. It's been through so many different hands. Every time it comes back, we do a quick turnaround in terms of, checking everything is okay again. But we were kind of forced down that avenue for a while. We thought maybe we'd get under the or it would come in under the council's insurance, but that just was never going to work. So like I said, we just did it on the basis of trust. And then your other question, while we might on the face of it look like we've lots of members, I suppose the core crew that are very active are small enough, to be honest with you. I ran this project myself. So it was literally me. I was scheduling everybody in. I went on holidays and somebody took over for me for a couple of weeks, but essentially it was me running it for the year. So it was manageable. And I have to say it was manageable because it kind of runs itself. Once you're on top of people kind of coming in with the emails and scheduling, that's the main thing. And I suppose we're at one side of the scale, aren't we? Whereas you have the bike library, which is, such a much bigger project around the same thing of trialing bikes and giving people an opportunity to trial for periods of time. So we sit kind of lower down the scale. So if people are interested in doing things like that, you have our project, which was very small, which was, I would consider, manageable for one or two people, definitely. And then you have the larger, I suppose, kind of setups, which are the bike libraries and all of what that entails. So yeah. Did that answer what you were saying?
Fantastic. Thanks so much.
With Sakita who wants to come in.
Yeah, hi. Sorry I was late for starters. Yeah, Anne, it sounds an amazing effort, absolutely brilliant. There were two things that struck me. I don't actually know Limerick, having been there once for a rugby match, I think. How hilly is it? And has that been, an issue?
It's not. It's a very flat city, I suppose. That's the topography of the city. It's small, it's flat. And I suppose, from the city centre to the wider outer suburbs, you're talking about 5-6 kilometres. So it's a very, I suppose, and we often say this in our promotional stuff, it's just a very cycle friendly city. Excuse me, if we had the connections. Now, it's not all bad. They are building routes. We are seeing some routes certainly get over the line. Not on the ground yet, but with, I suppose, all of the projects that are in the pipeline, it should connect up in the next few years. But at the minute, it is that connection bit that's the issue. But in terms of the physically cycling around the city, it's quite an easy one to do. It's quite an easy city to cycle in.
Okay, that's great. The other thing is, I'm sort of based around the Skibbereen area. Have you been in touch at all, or are you in touch with Katie Mann of Cycle Sense in Skibbereen?
No, I'm not.
Okay,
no.
right. I might see if I can get you linked, because she's got an amazing project. She's got a cargo bike and has been working around Skibbereen. And there's a cycle bus as well that goes off. I think it's once or twice a week in the morning for the children. So
yes, we have one of those as well, actually.
Yeah,
that was kind of the first bit. Yeah.
No, it's great. So okay, so if I could pass your email on to Katie,
of course. Yeah,
that'd be great. Thank you. That's lovely. Thanks very much and well done.
Thanks, Sakita.
Great. Moyna? You're on mute there.
Hello. Thank you, Anne. It's very inspiring. I have an e-bike myself, but in rural countryside, the roads, I saw that safety was one of your things. It is just like incredibly dangerous cycling in a lot of places. And I was looking at your city centre of Limerick and was trying to picture myself on a cargo bike cycling up that street with all the cars and everything. There needs to be, I think the infrastructure needs to come somewhat first, because if you don't feel safe, I mean, I fell off and smashed my face on the road because of a pothole. Do you know what I mean? The edges of the rural roads, they just go. So, I mean, how can we campaign more locally to, even in small villages that wouldn't have a huge amount of traffic, but it's still quite dangerous to cycle because the narrow roads, and bends in cars going too fast, etc. Is there a way we can campaign locally to improve that situation?
You know, it's such a good question, Mina. And you know, I often think where I grew up in the mountains in North Kerry, so you know, I've often said that my children wouldn't be cycling there if I was still living there. You know,
Mm.
and I think waiting for it to happen, I can, you know, I understand that as well because it's just unsafe. But and it's easier, it's easier for in the city. It definitely is because you have some bit of, you
Mm.
know, sometimes there are little pockets of cycling pathways, but so that's why we set up the cycle bus, is that we were frustrated, we were waiting, it wasn't happening, and it was this idea that okay, we're just going to take over the road and cycle en masse together,
Mm.
which is what we did. We started off with 3 families, you know, and it then quickly over a period of 12 or 18 months became 10 families, became 15 families, and there was this kind of this impetus behind it. Then the local authority started to notice we were causing a bit of a fuss because one of the main pinch points, now we're talking about, you know, 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers
Mm.
of a cycle ride, but
Yeah.
there was a huge pinch point where we had to meet traffic on Shannon Bridge. For anybody that doesn't know it, it's a bridge.
Mm.
And Limerick, to connect from our side of the city to the schools, you have to go over a bridge. And so we had something like 13 or 14 lanes of traffic, and not one of them was a cycle lane. And so we had to cross this bridge every morning. You were in a lane of traffic with HGVs and with vans and with, you know, so much traffic. It was so dangerous. And we started campaigning, and we actually managed to get a cycle lane on Shannon Bridge. And so now the cycle bus uses that lane every morning and it's much safer. But I suppose it's about, you know, and you know, it feels like I'm preaching to the converted, but about starting small, maybe with an idea, getting kind of committed people to kind of come alongside you, because it's nigh impossible to do this stuff on your own. And then just, you know, highlighting it to the council, and the safety is an issue, and the fact that, you know, people of all ages want to cycle, they want to be safe, they want to be active. The health benefits is a huge one, and that's the one that I kind of keep
Mm.
pushing out a lot, because that's the area I work in, is that, you know, the health benefits in terms of our air quality, um you know, things like that. So it's about coming at it from a few different angles, not just this narrow focus on maybe cycling. It's back to that original slide of, you know, the
Mm.
conversation is not just about cycling. It's about so many other things. It's about our health. It's about our children's health. It's about, you know, our age, our air quality, like I said, and all those things. Um, but in terms of rural Ireland, it's just, it feels like it's so often neglected in this conversation.
Mm.
You
They've
know,
I have to say, Westmeath County Council over the last year or so made an effort of putting pathways in for people to walk safely at the side of the road. And I suppose you could use them to cycle, but if you've got a couple of people who are walking, they don't appreciate you coming up and making them move out the way. You know what I mean? It's
yeah, no,
even
that's not
down
good
the
either. Yeah.
even down the canal, which is nice and flat and people cycle. A friend of mine, she just stopped to let a car go past, and she ended up in the ditch, even though she was stationary, because the car come a bit too close, and she fell in the ditch. Thankfully, not the canal side, but you know, it's when you, as you get older, you sort of thinking, oh, it's quite, it makes you not confident and going out on your bicycle.
Thanks. I'm probably just going to let Sive and Elaine come in, and then we might move on to the next part of the meeting and let Anne enjoy the rest of her lunch break. So Sive, do you want to come in first?
I just wanted to come in on your point, Moina, because, well, there's just a few things to bear in mind. One is that local authorities, once the minister commences the legislation, will have the power to reduce speed limits in their functional areas. And that is something that you could use as a kind of focal point for a campaign around one or two, not necessarily all, but just one or two key rural roads that already are, say, so bendy that the traffic can't go too fast anyway. And if you can reduce the speed limit to about 30 kilometers per hour, that makes them much safer for cyclists to use, even without any additional infrastructure. And there's a group, I think, in Clonakilty, I'm sure Sakit is aware of them, the Clonakilty Bike campaign, that have been working on this, and they call them rural roads. So the idea is you're creating the existing network of rural laneways and roads that could be, with a lower speed limit, made much safer, and with a bit of signing and advertising, you know, this road will have cyclists on it, you know, kind of thing. And to create those beautiful networks of cycling routes in the countryside, because like you, cycling in the countryside is just absolutely wonderful, but it's very dangerous. And the second thing I was just going to say is that where I live in Waterford, it's really quite hilly. I mean, some of the hills I just can't do them on my bike, but an e-bike is a complete game changer. And that's the thing we need to remember, is that e-bikes make cycling accessible for people for whom it wouldn't otherwise be accessible. And also it makes areas cyclable and cities and towns that are hilly. So, you know, so hills can't be the obstacle anymore. And the third point is just that the local authorities, when they're doing their climate action plans, this is an opportunity to get them to look at cycle routes between towns and not just inside towns. So they're supposed to be rolling out what they call the Cycle Connects plan. So, for example, in Waterford, they're going to dedicate a good chunk of the existing road between Waterford and Tramore to a kind of a 2-lane cycle lane on the road, so it won't be interfering with the pedestrians, and it'll be much safer. But it's up to the local authorities to do that. They're not greenways, so they're not new strips of cycleway that are separated from the road. They're actually going to be on the road. But when you add in the dimension of e-bikes and the comfort and speed and the distances that go with that, they're going to be critical in providing, you know, longer networks that connect towns and villages, you know, apart from the cycling networks within towns and villages. So these are all things we can put in our submissions to the climate action plans. Thanks, Aaron.
Thanks, Clive. And lastly, Elaine.
Amazing project, Anne, and like, yeah, just very inspiring. All that work that was done. Very, very inspiring. And some of what Clive was saying just now is very interesting as well. An awful lot of the cycle campaign groups have been urban focused up to now, and I suppose this, despite having a keen interest in the issue, this, you know, it's the first time I actually heard about what you were talking about there, Clive, like rougher roads, or so I'm wondering, like, could there be a sort of a network of cycle, like rural, with a rural focus, like a cycle campaigning with a rural focus, because there's particular conditions that sort of apply in rural areas. I live in Cloughjordan, and I cycle an awful lot myself, but I wouldn't allow my children to cycle further than they cycle to school, but I wouldn't allow them to cycle further because of the rural roads and the bends. And then also there's an interesting intersection between, you know, the people campaigning to save hedgerows from a biodiversity perspective. And then, you know, if we want on rural roads, we want to keep the hedgerows, but we want to have cycle safety. So how can we do both? You know, can we put cycle lanes on the other side of hedgerows? So trying to integrate these two, they're both environmentalists, but they have quite different focuses. The hedgerow campaigners and the cycle campaigners, how do they intersect? I think could be an interesting way forward. So I think there's sort of an interesting way forward to look at like cycling in rural areas in particular and try and put some sort of a network. And just backing up what I was saying, like here we contributed to the Nina Town Transport Plan consultations, and Tipperary Climate Action Plan consultation. So yeah, there's an awful lot of course, there's a lot of work to do that, but there are a lot of consultations out there that you can sort of chip in your views to, and then yeah, just and I think schools being a focal point is like, it's very inspiring from Anne's presentation. This the cycle bus, but yeah, like the ability of teenagers especially to be able to cycle to their extracurricular activities, not be driven around everywhere. You know, so many teenagers and children spend their lives being driven around in cars by their parents, yeah, like how to make that sort of a focal point, like the independent children cycling and teenagers cycling, and how that makes life without a car possible. I live without a car. I have 2 children, and it's tricky because they want to do extracurricular activities, and I have no way of getting them there and back, so I have to depend on lifts. So yeah, so I suppose that's another aspect. And then I think there's also a balance between, I think the concern that was being talked about before about, you know, what do you, or that Moina was saying about what do you do, there's encouragement and there's infrastructure. So and sometimes you're arguing the opposite side. So if you're trying to encourage cycling, you're actually arguing with people that it's not all that bad. You can cycle, you can get around, which is often true. Sometimes it can be perceived to be more dangerous than it actually is. So and it's about people getting used to the idea and getting comfortable. So there's that sort of argument. And yet on the other side of the coin, there are huge infrastructure problems and improvements that need to be made. So when you're arguing at that end, then you're sort of like telling the government how terrible everything is, and you know, you're putting a message out there that the infrastructure is terrible and needs improvement. And yet when you're trying to encourage people to cycle, you're sort of saying the opposite. You're saying, you know that it's not bad to cycle, and you know it's safer than it seems. So sometimes it can be a bit of a dilemma which angle to take on that one. Yeah, so those were just 4 points that came up for me listening to the debate.
Perfect, thanks. And Anne, maybe if you just want to come in on any of that, or just some final thoughts overall.
Just, I suppose that I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Elaine. They're kind of those frustrations that you know, that we all kind of grapple with, and sometimes it is nice being in a campaign because you kind of get, you know, a place where you can just vent to your heart's content about something, because everybody's thinking they, you know, has the same feelings. And actually we did something with Walk 21 last year, which was really useful, which was an effort to try and get lots of pedestrian and cyclists, I suppose active travel campaigners, in a room together to kind of talk about that kind of stuff, you know, because a lot of us end up giving a huge amount of time to these efforts and campaigns and things like that. And sometimes I think more now than ever we're seeing some success, so that's wonderful. But then, you know, there's times where you put a lot of effort into campaigns and votes or whatever don't go your way, and it feels like a missed opportunity. And so there's a lot, I suppose, in this area, active travel advocacy or campaigning. But so it's, I suppose my message is, it's good to be part of a group, or it's certainly good to have conversations with people that you know, or have the same kind of thoughts as yourself. I'll share my number, and or no, actually I think it's my email, if anybody wants to give me a shout. And just, I suppose, the link that if you shared to the cyclist.ie, you know, Joan Swift is involved in that rural campaign, and she's a powerhouse. Anything she's involved in is just amazing. So you know, that might be a good place to start, Moina, or Elaine. I think, you know, all of the people that are involved in it, Joe Sachs Eldridge and Anne and Dumbledow and Kerry, they're fantastic activists. So listen, thanks a million. I suppose I'll scoot off. So Aaron, is that all right?
That's perfect. Yeah, thanks so
Yeah.
much for coming along, Anne, and thanks for contributing.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. Best of luck, everyone.
Okay,
Thank you.
have a lovely day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.